She should never have been on that flight. But fate had a way of forcing the powerless into places the powerful thought they owned. Angela's hands trembled as the aircraft jolted, her uniform still damp with sweat from a 12-hour hospital shift. She wasn't supposed to be in first class. People like her didn't belong here. And yet, here she was, racing against the silence of a young woman's fading breath. The aisle was narrow, but the whispers were sharp. A billionaire's daughter lay slumped in her seat, skin turning the color of ash, lips cracked, chest struggling for air. Around her, passengers froze, not from concern, but from disbelief that a black nurse had pushed past velvet curtains to answer a cry for help. The hum of the jet engines wasn't loud enough to cover the judgment. She shouldn't touch her. Where's the real doctor? Who let her up here? The words cut, but Angela didn't flinch. She pressed 2 fingers against the girl's neck, searching for the pulse that skipped like a broken record. Her training told her what to do. Her heart told her she didn't have time to wait. But every second she acted, every movement she made felt like a crime in their eyes. The flight attendant hesitated, torn between the weight of status and the urgency of life. One look at Angela's badge, registered nurse, should have been enough. But in first class, titles carried less weight than skin color. The girl's breathing faltered, a dry gasp, a sharp wheeze. Then, silence. Angela whispered under her breath, not a prayer, not a plea, just raw determination. Stay with me. Her hands moved faster, tilting the head, clearing the airway. The cabin, once filled with chatter, was now an arena of held breath, and still the passengers stared, as if the act of saving a life was a crime against the invisible order they believed in. The girl convulsed once, then stilled. For a moment the entire plane seemed to hold time itself. And then Angela looked up, her eyes wide, sweat dripping down her temple. She's been poisoned. The words were soft, almost too soft to hear, but they struck harder than any scream. First class erupted. Questions, accusations, fear clawing at the air. Some pulled out phones, others pulled away, as if even standing near the truth might taint their wealth and comfort. And in the middle of it all, Angela stood, her gloved hands stained with the evidence of something no one wanted to believe. The girl wasn't drunk, she wasn't fainting, she wasn't weak. She had been poisoned. The question now was why. But before we unravel that, let me ask you this. If you were in Angela's shoes, facing a room full of suspicion while trying to save a life, would you still push forward or step back and protect yourself? Tell me in the comments below. I want to hear your voice. And if you're just joining us on this journey of injustice, secrets, and buried truths, make sure you hit subscribe, because this story is only just beginning. The moment Angela spoke the word poisoned, the cabin changed. It was no longer a room of travelers bound for Chicago. It was a courtroom, and Angela stood trial. Eyes shifted, not to the unconscious girl gasping for life, but to the nurse who dared speak truth aloud. She said poisoned. What's she implying? Maybe she did it. The voices no longer whispered. They clawed. They accused. Angela's chest tightened, but her hands never stopped working. Compressions, breaths, compressions again. Each second mattered. Each second dragged her deeper into their storm. A man in a navy suit, his cufflinks glinting under the cabin lights, leaned forward, his voice like sharpened steel. Who gave you permission to touch her? Do you know who her father is? Angela did not answer. Her training demanded silence, focus, precision. But silence in first class was taken as guilt. A woman in pearls clutched her handbag tighter, pulling it away as though proximity itself could stain her wealth. Another passenger raised his phone, recording, not to help, but to capture the downfall of a stranger. The irony burned. A girl lay dying, and yet the room cared more about who was saving her than whether she lived. Angela pressed harder, whispering again, "Stay with me." and for a heartbeat, a faint flicker, the girl's chest rose. Hope, but hope was fragile here. A flight attendant finally crouched beside Angela, her voice shaking. "What do you need?" Angela answered quickly, clinically. "Oxygen, IV line, stabilize vitals before landing." But the man in the Navy suit interrupted. "No, don't listen to her. Call for a real doctor." The words froze the attendant. Her eyes darted between authority and urgency, between class and conscience. And in that hesitation, Angela saw it. The same invisible chains she had felt her entire life. Chains of doubt, chains of status, chains that tightened whenever she stepped beyond the line society had drawn for her. The girl's body twitched. The heart monitor beeped faintly from Angela's portable kit. Time was running out, and just as Angela reached for the oxygen mask, a heavy hand clamped down on her wrist. "Step back," the man ordered. His grip was firm, his authority unquestioned, his arrogance absolute. Angela met his eyes, and for the first time, her voice broke through the silence like thunder. "If I step back, she dies." The cabin went still. The engines hummed. The girl's shallow breaths trembled in the air. And for that moment, the question hung between them all. Who would they believe? The billionaire's power or the nurse's truth? The man's grip on Angela's wrist lingered, heavy with entitlement. In that single act, he wasn't just stopping her. He was declaring that her hands, her knowledge, her very presence had no right to exist in this cabin. Angela's pulse pounded in her ears, but she kept her voice steady. "Let me work. Every second we waste takes her further away." But the room didn't see seconds. They saw status. Another voice rose, sharp and brittle. A woman in designer sunglasses pushed them down her nose and said, "She's not even a doctor. What if she makes it worse? What if she's the reason this happened?" The suggestion spread like wildfire. Whispers turned to nods. Nods turned to muttered agreement. Soon, Angela was no longer the woman saving a life. She was the stranger under suspicion. Maybe she slipped something in her drink. She was sitting back there, wasn't she? I saw her rush up here, like she knew it would happen. Angela froze for a fraction of a second. The audacity of it all. The cruelty. She had rushed forward to save a life, and now they were painting her as executioner. The girl's body convulsed again. A shallow, broken sound slipped from her throat. Angela yanked her arm free, her voice breaking with urgency. "She's going into respiratory failure. I need that oxygen. Now!" The flight attendant wavered, trapped in the crossfire of wealth and morality. The billionaire's circle of influence loomed large, even midair. Her hands trembled as she reached for the oxygen tank, then froze again under the burning gaze of the suited man. And then, a voice broke through. A soft, shaky voice from the back of first class. "Let her help." All heads turned. A young mother, clutching her toddler to her chest, stood just beyond the velvet curtain. Her eyes carried no wealth, no status, only truth. "You're all standing around arguing while that girl is dying. Let her do her job." The cabin split in two. Some passengers scoffed, muttering about outsiders interfering. Others shifted uncomfortably, their moral compass poking through the armor of privilege. But the man in the Navy suit doubled down. His voice was iron. "You don't understand. That girl's father, he won't forgive mistakes. If this nurse fails, it's on us. On all of us." Angela snapped her gaze to him, her jaw tight. "And if I do nothing, it's on me. So ask yourself, what's worse? Explaining why you let a nurse try, or explaining why you stood by and watched his daughter die?" Silence. The weight of her words cut deeper than any argument. Even the hum of the engines seemed to fade beneath them. The flight attendant's hand finally moved. Oxygen mask, tubing, trembling fingers placing them into Angela's hands. She wasted no time. She sealed the mask over the girl's face, adjusted the flow, watched as a faint trace of color returned. Not much, but enough to pull the girl one step further from the edge. The monitor beeped faintly. Weak, but present. Angela let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. For a moment it felt like victory, but as she looked up, she saw it in their eyes. Suspicion hadn't gone away. It had only sharpened. And deep in her chest, Angela knew this was far from over. Saving the girl's life was one battle. Proving she hadn't caused this was another war entirely. The cabin doors opened with a hiss, and the world outside exploded into chaos. EMTs stormed the jet bridge, their stretchers rattling against the floor. The billionaire's daughter was swept from her seat, tubes and monitors clattering as Angela clung to her side. For a moment, it felt like a small mercy. Ground beneath her feet, sirens in the distance, professionals moving fast. Maybe, just maybe, the nightmare would end here. But nightmares don't end at the runway. They simply change scenery. As they wheeled the girl into the ambulance, Angela climbed in beside her. The billionaire's entourage stayed close, their designer shoes clicking against the concrete like a warning. No one thanked her. No one asked how she knew what to do. Instead, they whispered. Low, urgent whispers, sharp enough for Angela to feel the cuts even if she couldn't make out the words. She was too fast, too confident. Check her bag, check everything. Angela tightened her grip on the stretcher rail. She told herself to focus. The girl's pulse was faint, but steady. That was what mattered. That was the only thing that mattered. The ambulance sirens screamed through Chicago streets, slicing through traffic, barreling toward Northwestern Memorial. Angela's eyes stayed locked on the girl's face, searching for any sign of change. But in the reflection of the window, she caught it again. Suspicion. The way the billionaire's lawyer kept staring at her, lips pressed thin, phone already in hand. And then came the sentence that froze her blood. From the corner of the ambulance, the family's matriarch spoke softly, almost gently, as though rehearsing it for later. If she dies, it will be her fault. Angela's stomach twisted. She knew what that meant. Not just blame, not just suspicion. They were preparing a story, a version of events where she wasn't the savior, but the scapegoat. The ambulance doors burst open at the ER. Fluorescent lights, gurneys, shouts. The billionaire's daughter was rushed straight into the ICU, and Angela found herself swept along by instinct, her training pushing her forward. But just as she reached for gloves, a firm hand blocked her chest. "You're not authorized here," the charge nurse said flatly. "Step back." The billionaire's lawyer appeared behind him, voice smooth, rehearsed, and venomous. She forced her way onto the scene on the plane. "We have reason to believe she may have interfered. Keep her away from the patient." Angela's mouth opened, but the words tangled in her throat. Interfered? She had kept the girl alive long enough to make it here, and now they were cutting her out, rewriting history before her eyes. The ICU doors slammed shut, a wall of glass, sterile and impenetrable. On the other side, doctors in white coats surrounded the girl. On this side, Angela stood frozen in the corridor, every head turning toward her, eyes full of doubt. And then, a voice cut through the intercom. The lead physician's words cracked through the hallway like a hammer on glass. "Poison detected. Patient condition critical." The corridor gasped. Poison. The word stuck to Angela like a brand. Every suspicious glance now had a label. Every whisper now had a weapon. Angela's chest tightened. She hadn't even touched the girl's drink. She hadn't even known who she was until the collapse. But none of that mattered anymore. The story was already forming, and Angela could feel it. The first shadow of a storm that would only grow darker. The word hung in the air like smoke. Poison. It spread faster than the sirens, faster than the footsteps of doctors rushing past. Nurses exchanged glances. Security guards stiffened at the doors. Even the billionaire's entourage straightened, as if the puzzle piece they had been waiting for had finally clicked into place. Angela stood frozen in the ICU corridor, the sterile light above her flickering faintly. She could feel every eye, every whisper pressing against her skin. The family's lawyer stepped forward, his voice calm, deliberate, the kind of voice trained to persuade judges and destroy reputations. "You see? We had our concerns, and now, here's the proof. Someone tampered with her." Angela's throat tightened, her hands curled into fists at her sides. "I didn't touch her food. I didn't touch her drink. I saved her." But truth, spoken in desperation, is brittle against money, against influence. The mother, the woman in pearls who hadn't so much as looked at Angela during the entire flight, lifted her chin and spoke with ice. "We all saw you rush forward, too fast, too eager, almost as if you were waiting for her to collapse." The words cut deeper than any knife. Too fast, too eager. Saving a life had become a crime in their mouths. A hospital administrator appeared, clipboard in hand, voice trembling with the weight of the situation. "Until we know more, ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to remain here. Security will need your statement." Two uniformed officers moved closer, not arresting, not yet, but close enough to remind Angela of the cage tightening around her. Her chest rose and fell, fury battling fear. She wanted to scream at them, to drag them into the ICU and show them the girl's pale face, to prove that without her hands, that child would already be gone. But then, through the glass, Angela saw it. The billionaire's daughter's body jolted against the bed. Alarms blared. Doctors scrambled. For a split second, the world narrowed to that single room, that single life dangling between earth and ash. And still, their eyes stayed on Angela. One of the officers leaned in, his voice low, suspicious. "Funny thing, you just happened to be there, just happened to jump in." He paused, studying her face. "Almost like you were waiting for it." Angela's heart thundered. She wasn't just fighting to save a girl anymore. She was fighting to save herself. The ICU doors slammed shut again, leaving her stranded on the wrong side of the glass. And with every second that ticked by, the walls of the hospital seemed to close tighter around her. The poison wasn't just in the girl's veins. It was in the room. It was in the whispers. It was in the story they were already writing about her. And Angela knew, if she didn't find the truth fast, she wouldn't just lose her patient. She'd lose everything. The room was small, windowless, and cold. Not the kind of cold that comes from air conditioning, but the kind that seeps into your bones, the kind that whispers, "You are not welcome here." Angela sat on one side of a metal table, her scrubs wrinkled, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Across from her, two detectives. One leaned back, arms folded, eyes calculating. The other tapped a pen against his notepad, sharp, rhythmic, like a clock counting down. "Let's start from the beginning," the first one said. His voice carried no warmth. "Tell us why you were in first class." Angela's jaw clenched. "I wasn't in first class. I came from economy when I heard the commotion. The girl collapsed. Nobody moved. I'm a nurse. I stepped in." The second detective scribbled something, then looked up. "Funny thing. You were fast, real fast, almost like you knew it was coming." Her pulse quickened, but she kept her tone steady. "I've worked in trauma for years. You learn to move without hesitation." The pen scratched again. The silence stretched, heavy, accusing. And then, the question that made her chest tighten. "Did you know the girl?" Angela blinked. "No, I didn't even know who she was until someone shouted her name." The detectives exchanged a glance, subtle, but not lost on her. The one leaning back spoke again. "You expect us to believe that? You didn't recognize her? The daughter of one of the wealthiest men in Chicago?" Angela shook her head slowly. "She was just a patient. That's all I saw. That's all I cared about." But she could feel it, the weight of their disbelief pressing down on her, trying to bend her into a confession that didn't exist. And then came the detail that made her stomach turn. The detective with the pen slid a photograph across the table, a still image from inside the plane. The billionaire's daughter on the floor, Angela kneeling over her, and in the corner, barely visible, her tote bag open, its contents spilled in the rush. Among them, a small amber vial. Angela's breath caught. "That's my medication," she said quickly. "I carry it for migraines. It has nothing to do with her." But the look in their eyes said everything. It didn't matter what she said. The image was enough to seed doubt. Angela leaned forward, her voice firm, almost pleading now. "Listen to me. I didn't poison that girl. I saved her. If you really think I had something to do with this, then ask yourself one question. Why would I keep her alive long enough for you to find the poison?" Silence. The pen stopped tapping. The detective who had been leaning back finally straightened, his gaze narrowing. "That's the thing. Maybe you didn't want her dead. Maybe you just wanted a scare. A message. To who? That's what we're going to find out." Angela's stomach twisted. A scare? A message? No, that wasn't her. That wasn't anything she knew. But their eyes told her the truth she didn't want to face. They didn't just see her as a suspect. They saw her as part of a bigger story. And for the first time, Angela wondered, what if this wasn't about the girl at all? They released her hours later, not because they believed her, but because they had no proof to hold her, yet. Angela stepped into the hospital corridor, the fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead. She should have felt relief, but instead she felt the opposite. The walls still watched, the whispers still followed, and the word poison trailed behind her like a shadow. She moved quietly toward the waiting area, drawn by a strange need to see them, the family, the ones who had turned her from rescuer into suspect. They were gathered in a private corner, separated from the rest of the waiting families by glass walls and velvet ropes, as though privilege could protect them from tragedy. Angela stopped just far enough to remain unseen. The matriarch sat stiffly, pearls glinting under the harsh light. Her face was pale, but her voice carried a sharp edge. "No one says a word about last night, not to the press, not to anyone. Understood?" The lawyer nodded, scribbling furiously, but it was the next line that made Angela's chest tighten. "We can't afford another scandal." Another scandal? Her brows knit together. This wasn't shock. This wasn't grief. This was containment, damage control, and then something even stranger. The suited man, the one who had grabbed Angela's wrist on the plane, leaned in close to the lawyer. His words were low, but Angela caught fragments through the glass. It was meant for him, not her. Her pulse thundered. She strained to hear more, but just then the lawyer glanced up, his eyes sweeping the corridor. Angela pulled back quickly, heart racing, praying he hadn't seen her. It was meant for him. The words replayed in her head over and over. Who was him? The billionaire? Someone else entirely? And if the poison wasn't intended for the daughter, then the entire narrative was a lie. Angela pressed her back against the wall, her breath shallow. For the first time, she realized she wasn't just a scapegoat. She was standing inside a story bigger than she had imagined, one where the daughter was collateral, and the real target still walked the halls alive. But who? And why? She closed her eyes, steadying her breath. Somewhere inside this hospital the truth waited, buried under money, secrecy, and fear. And Angela knew, if she didn't uncover it first, the next person to collapse might not get back up. Angela knew she shouldn't be there. The ICU wing was restricted, guarded by silence and the soft pulse of machines. But curiosity, no, survival, pulled her down that hallway. Every instinct told her to turn back, yet her feet carried her forward, toward the glass walls where the billionaire's daughter lay unconscious, pale against the sheets. Nurses moved quietly, their voices hushed. But just beyond the sliding doors, Angela spotted two doctors, faces grave, postures tense. They didn't see her. They didn't know she was listening. "Levels don't make sense," one whispered, shaking his head. "It isn't arsenic. It isn't cyanide. This isn't anything standard." The second doctor leaned closer, his voice even lower. "Then what is it?" A pause, a glance over the shoulder. It's custom. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. Angela's stomach dropped. Custom poison. This wasn't random, it wasn't clumsy. It was planned with precision, tailored like a suit, designed for one purpose: to kill. Her heart hammered as she pressed closer to the wall, trying to catch every word. "And the delivery?" the first asked. The second doctor hesitated, lowering his tone until Angela could barely catch the syllables. Traces suggest ingestion, but the timing, it had to be calculated within minutes. This was orchestrated. Angela's breath caught. Minutes? On the flight? Then she remembered. The glass of water, the way the steward hesitated before handing it over. The hand that tried to pull her away when she rushed to help. This wasn't chance. This was choreography. A sudden noise behind her made Angela freeze, a guard turning the corner. She pulled back, her back flat to the wall, heart racing. If they caught her here, it would only deepen suspicion. But as the guard walked past without noticing, Angela risked one last glance at the ICU window. The daughter lay motionless, fragile, silent. But Angela's eyes weren't on her anymore. They were on the shadows around her bed, the ones moving, whispering, covering. This wasn't just a fight to save a life. It was a fight against a script already written by powerful hands. And Angela, an outsider, a nurse, a scapegoat, wasn't supposed to hear it. But now that she had, she couldn't unhear it. Somebody wanted the billionaire's family shattered, and somebody was very close to succeeding. The hospital lobby changed the moment he walked in. No alarms, no announcement. Just the shift in atmosphere. Security men tightening their posture, nurses exchanging uneasy glances, even the air seeming to grow colder as the doors slid open. Richard Whitmore had arrived, billionaire industrialist, the man whose name bought skyscrapers, silenced critics, and bent institutions to his will. He didn't rush, he didn't demand, he didn't even look panicked. He moved with deliberate calm, as though he had been expecting this. Angela, standing by the far wall, felt her chest tighten. She had seen men like him before, powerful, untouchable, but never this close, never with this much at stake. His daughter's life hung by a thread, yet his expression was unreadable. He nodded once to the hospital director, a trembling man who nearly spilled his papers trying to greet him. "Mr. Whitmore, we have your daughter in ICU. The doctors are doing everything possible." Richard simply raised a hand. "Spare me reassurances. Take me to her." The corridor cleared instantly, as though walls themselves shifted to give him passage. Angela, caught in the shuffle, lowered her head, hoping to blend into the crowd. But then, his eyes flicked toward her, just for a second, a glance too sharp, too knowing. She froze. Had he recognized her? Or worse, had he been told about her already? The group moved to the ICU doors, Richard's entourage in perfect sync behind him. But as he reached the threshold, he paused. Slowly, he turned back, scanning the room, lingering on Angela once more. His voice was calm, but it carried like thunder. "Lock down the ward! Nobody in! Nobody out!" The order snapped through the hall like a whip. Guards moved instantly, sealing exits, stationing themselves at every corner. Angela's pulse quickened. She wasn't just trapped in suspicion anymore, she was trapped in his domain. Inside the ICU, Richard finally approached his daughter's bed. He stood there, silent, for what felt like an eternity. His hand hovered above hers but never touched. His jaw tightened, and in the faint reflection on the glass, Angela caught it, just for a second. Not grief, not fear. Something colder, something like calculation. And then, almost too softly to hear, his words slipped into the sterile air. She was poisoned. The doctors froze. Nurses exchanged quick, startled looks. But Richard? He said it not as a discovery, but as a statement, as though he already knew. Angela's blood ran cold. How could he know? Unless this wasn't an attack on his family, unless it was something orchestrated from within. Angela barely had time to process Richard Whitmore's chilling words before the hospital guards shifted. Two men in black suits broke from the group, their footsteps echoing sharply against the linoleum floor. They weren't hospital staff. They were Whitmore's private security, and their eyes were locked on her. "Miss, you'll need to come with us," one said flatly. No room for refusal. Her pulse spiked. Every instinct screamed that following them meant disappearing into a place she would never return from. I don't understand," Angela stammered. "I've done nothing wrong. I was just—" The second man stepped closer, his hand hovering dangerously near his coat, where a weapon almost certainly waited. "Now!" The hallway seemed to shrink. Nurses ducked their heads, avoiding eye contact. Even the doctors who had just spoken about the poison said nothing. Silence pressed down on Angela, suffocating. She backed a step, her voice trembling. "You think I did this? You think I poisoned her?" The first guard didn't blink. "We don't think. We know where you were. We know what you touched." Angela's breath hitched. They were framing her. Every action, every desperate attempt to help, had been twisted into evidence against her. Her back touched the wall. No way out, no air, just the certainty that this was the end. And then a voice cut through the tension, calm, firm, unshaken. "She stays where she is." Heads turned, the security froze, and Angela, her chest still heaving, saw him. Dr. Caleb Foster, head of emergency. Respected, unbending, and until now, silent. He stepped forward, shoulders squared. "You don't get to dictate protocol in my hospital," Foster said, his tone sharp enough to slice the silence. "She saved your daughter's life on that plane. If you remove her now, you might as well admit you're not here for answers. You're here for a scapegoat." The words hung heavy. Even Richard Whitmore turned from the glass, his cold eyes narrowing on the doctor. For a long, terrible moment, nobody moved. Then Whitmore's lips curved, just slightly. Not a smile. Something sharper. "Very well, for now." He waved his hand, and the guards stepped back, though their eyes stayed locked on Angela like wolves denied a meal. Angela's knees almost buckled. Relief washed over her, but only for a second. Because she knew what she had just witnessed. Whitmore wasn't letting her go. He was circling her, testing her, waiting for her to slip, and Foster? He had just painted a target on himself too. The hospital lights buzzed faintly overhead as Angela sat alone in the staff lounge, her hands trembling around a cup of untouched coffee. The adrenaline hadn't left her body. Every shadow in the hallway felt like it carried Whitmore's eyes. She wanted to believe Dr. Foster's intervention had bought her safety, but deep down, she knew it hadn't. It had only delayed the inevitable, and then another knock at the door. It creaked open, revealing a nurse she recognized, Lisa Morales, young, sharp, the kind who noticed things others missed. She slipped inside quickly, closing the door behind her. "Angela," Lisa whispered, her voice low, "you need to hear this. It changes everything." Angela's heart tightened. "What do you mean?" Lisa looked around nervously, then pulled a folded sheet of paper from her scrubs. "Test results." She spread them on the table, pointing to the numbers with shaking fingers. "It wasn't designed for her," Lisa said. "The dosage, the compound, it doesn't add up. For a girl her size, it would have been instantly fatal. But for a larger adult," she swallowed. "It was a perfect match." Angela's eyes widened. "You mean—" Lisa nodded, finishing the thought for her. "This wasn't meant for the daughter. This poison was meant for her father." The words landed like a thunderclap. Angela's mind reeled back. To the flight, to the moment the steward passed that glass, to the hesitation in his hand. She remembered how the billionaire's daughter had only reached for it because Whitmore was on a call, distracted, and she took the glass in his place. She wasn't supposed to drink it. Angela's blood ran cold. That meant the person behind this hadn't failed. They had nearly succeeded. And worse, if Richard Whitmore knew this already, then his calmness, his lack of panic. It all made sense. He wasn't grieving. He wasn't shocked. He was calculating who among his enemies had dared to come for him. Angela pushed the papers back toward Lisa, her voice barely a whisper. "Why are you telling me this?" Lisa's eyes flicked toward the door. Fear shadowed her face. "Because if they find out I told you, I won't make it home tonight." The two women sat in silence, the weight of the revelation pressing down like a stone. Angela realized something then, something that chilled her to the bone. She was no longer just a nurse who got caught in the middle. She was holding a secret people would kill to protect. Angela's footsteps echoed down the private corridor, each one heavier than the last. She shouldn't be here. Every fiber of her training screamed at her to stay away, to hand over the information and walk out while she still could. But she couldn't, not after what Lisa had shown her. At the end of the hallway stood the guarded door to Richard Whitmore's suite. Two men in tailored suits flanked it, their earpieces glinting under the fluorescent lights. Security, not hospital staff. Angela swallowed, clutching the test results inside her lab coat. "I need to see him," she said firmly, masking the fear in her voice. The taller guard studied her badge, then her eyes. For a long moment, Angela thought he might refuse. But then, he stepped aside, tapping the earpiece. The other pushed the door open. Inside, the room was dim, curtains drawn, a faint beeping from a monitor in the corner, and there, seated beside his unconscious daughter's bed, was Whitmore himself. Not a tear in sight. No sign of worry. Only a man with his back straight, his hands folded, and his gaze fixed on Angela the moment she entered. "You took your time," he said smoothly, as though he'd been expecting her. Angela hesitated. "Mr. Whitmore, I know." He tilted his head. "Know what?" She set the folded paper on the table between them. "Your daughter wasn't the target. This poison, this was meant for you." For the first time, Whitmore blinked, not in surprise, but in amusement. A faint smirk curved his lips. "You're sharper than I thought," he murmured. "Most people never see past the surface." Angela stiffened. "You don't seem shocked." "I'm not," he said, leaning back in his chair. "In my world, enemies don't come with warning labels. They come with gifts, disguised as safety, trust, loyalty." His voice lowered, dangerous and calm. "My only surprise is that my daughter drank before I did." Angela's stomach churned. He had known. He had known and sat here, waiting, calculating. "Then why—" She struggled for words. "Why haven't you told the police?" Whitmore leaned forward, his eyes boring into hers. "Because the police don't solve problems like this. They make noise, they make headlines, and in the noise, my enemies slip further away." He tapped the paper with one finger. "You've stepped into something, nurse, something you're not equipped to carry. The question is, do you want out or do you want in?" Angela froze. His words felt like chains. Out meant silence, walking away, pretending she had seen nothing. In meant becoming complicit in whatever storm was gathering. Her pulse raced, every instinct screaming to leave. But another voice whispered, the voice that had kept her alive on this job, the voice that told her injustice could only fester if no one stood against it. She realized Whitmore wasn't just testing her. He was deciding whether she was a liability or an asset, and one wrong word could decide her fate. Angela left Whitmore's suite with more questions than answers. Every step down the corridor felt heavier, weighed down by secrets she wasn't sure she could carry. And then she remembered. The envelope. It had been lying on the tray table during the flight. White, plain, unassuming. No one had noticed it. Not the flight attendants, not the daughter, not even the billionaire's entourage. Everyone was too busy with the collapse to see its significance. But Angela had, Something had tugged at her instincts, a small sense of wrongness she couldn't shake. She retraced her steps mentally. Where had it gone? In the chaos of first aid, the envelope had fallen, probably into the seat-back pocket, or worse, collected by the crew and sent along with the luggage. Angela's mind raced. Whatever was inside, it had to matter. Otherwise, why would her instincts scream at her to remember it? Back in the ICU waiting area, she discreetly asked a nurse, trying not to draw attention. "Has anyone found a white envelope from the flight?" The nurse shook her head. "Nothing that I know of. Everything was bagged and taken by security." Angela's jaw tightened. Then she remembered something else. Security. Whitmore's own guards. If the envelope had been found, it would have gone straight to him. She needed it. Whatever was inside could explain the poison, the timing, the target. And maybe, just maybe, it could give her leverage. Hours later, as the hospital quieted and night fell, an unexpected delivery arrived at the nurse's station. A small package, white, unmarked, sealed tight. Angela's hands trembled as she broke the seal. Inside, a single folded sheet of paper. She opened it carefully and froze. The words on the paper weren't a threat. They weren't a confession. They were a map, a sequence of instructions, names and times. And at the bottom, scrawled in sharp, precise handwriting, "The target is not who you think. Save her, if you dare." Angela's eyes darted up. The daughter lay in the bed across the hall, hooked to machines, unaware that she had just been used as a shield. Her pulse thundered in her ears. This wasn't random. This wasn't chaos. This was deliberate. And now, Angela realized the truth that would change everything. She was no longer just fighting to save a life. She was caught in the center of a calculated game, one that could cost her, or anyone else, their life. Somebody had planned this from the start. Somebody had anticipated every move, and the envelope was just the beginning. Angela's hands shook as she unfolded the last line of the envelope's instructions. Her eyes raced over the names and times, each one a thread in a tapestry she had only begun to see. Then it hit her. The intended target had never been the daughter. It had been Richard Whitmore himself. Her heart hammered in her chest. The realization was almost too much to bear. Every glance, every hesitation on the flight, every small act of panic now made sense. The daughter had been an accident, a shield, a proxy, a tragic mistake in a plan executed with deadly precision. Angela swallowed hard. The hospital felt suddenly smaller, suffocating. She pieced it together, the glass, the steward's hesitation, the precise poison in the envelope. Someone had calculated every step, predicting that Whitmore's daughter would be nearby, but not the primary victim. The intention had always been to reach him, and now the horrifying truth settled in. She wasn't just a scapegoat anymore. She was a witness. And witnesses don't survive in this kind of game. Angela's mind raced. She needed answers, and fast. But how? Whitmore himself remained calm, collected, unfazed by the near-fatal incident that had just brushed against his life. Could he already know, or was he just playing a part? Then she noticed it, a subtle tremor in his hands as he adjusted his cufflinks, a small human crack in the armor of a man who rarely faltered. Her pulse quickened. She realized she had to act, and she had to act carefully. Every move, every word could tip the balance, because someone had tried to kill him. Someone had almost succeeded. And now, the only thing standing between chaos and catastrophe was a nurse who had been underestimated at every turn. Angela leaned back slightly, her eyes narrowing. One thought burned hotter than fear. If I don't uncover the full truth, more than just one life will be lost, and this time it might be mine. And in that moment, the story shifted. The audience, having believed the daughter's collapse was the climax, now understood. The danger was far bigger, far closer, and far more insidious than anyone had imagined. The first twist had landed, and the next move would determine who survived. Angela left the envelope carefully folded on the small table in the staff lounge. Her mind was racing, connecting dots that didn't quite belong together, yet somehow formed a sinister pattern. She couldn't trust the hospital staff entirely. Someone inside could be feeding Whitmore information, or worse, working with whoever had tried to poison him. Her eyes scanned the hallways. Quiet, empty, perfect. Using the envelope as her guide, she retraced the flight's events, reconstructing each moment. The steward who hesitated, the spilled glass of water, the bag that had been slightly ajar. Then she saw it, something subtle, almost imperceptible. A small logo on the inside of a flight attendant's uniform pocket. Something she had missed before. It was a signature, one only someone very familiar with Whitmore's schedule would know. And the thought hit her like ice. The accomplice wasn't just on the flight. The accomplice was inside Whitmore's inner circle. Angela's stomach churned. Every step, every interaction now carried weight. Every smile could mask deceit. Every nod could be a lie. She pulled out her phone, quietly snapping photos of every clue she could gather, her hands steady despite the adrenaline. And then, her phone buzzed. A single message appeared on the screen. "Stop digging, or next time it won't be her life at risk." Her blood ran cold. Someone was watching. Someone knew she was uncovering the truth. Angela forced herself to breathe. Her pulse raced, but she clenched her fists. She had already survived too much to stop now. Every piece of evidence pointed to one impossible conclusion. The person orchestrating the attempt on Whitmore's life had infiltrated his circle, hidden in plain sight. Angela realized she had two choices: retreat, let the investigation die, and survive another day, or confront the betrayal head-on, risking everything. Her mind sharpened. Fear could not guide her now. Only action could. And as the elevator doors closed behind her, Angela felt the weight of the game she had just entered. One misstep, one false move, and the second twist, more shocking than anyone could imagine, would be unleashed. The stakes had never been higher. Angela's steps echoed down the dim hallway, each one measured, each one pulling her closer to the truth. The envelope had guided her this far, but what it hadn't revealed was the face behind the plan. She slipped into the private lounge adjoining Whitmore's suite, a place she had noticed only in passing. The lights were low, the air thick with the scent of expensive cologne and paper. And there, sitting casually behind a mahogany desk, was someone she never expected. Marissa Whitmore, the billionaire's own sister. Her smile was calm, almost serene. But Angela saw the glint in her eyes. The same glint she had seen in the envelope, in the subtle clues, in the almost imperceptible hesitations on the flight. "Angela," Marissa said, her voice soft but deliberate, "I've been expecting you." Angela froze. Her pulse thundered. You did this?" Marissa's lips curved. "Did what?" "I only arranged for him to realize who his real friends are." Every detail fell into place. The precise poison, the timing, the flight sequence. Marissa had orchestrated it all, using her niece as a shield, testing her brother, and watching to see who could be trusted. "You were the perfect pawn," Marissa continued, leaning back. "Brave, clever, loyal. You saved my niece, yes, but more importantly, you exposed the cracks. You revealed who acts out of fear and who acts out of principle." Angela's stomach turned. Everything she thought she knew about danger, about the target, about Whitmore's calm, had been manipulated by someone inside the family. "And if I had failed?" Angela asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. Marissa's smile didn't waver. "Then you wouldn't be here to ask the question, but you didn't fail. And now, you have a choice. Walk away, or step further into the game." Angela felt the weight of the room pressing in. Every life, every secret, every misstep, the consequences were hers to bear. And for the first time, Angela realized that the story was far from over. The twists weren't finished, and the danger was closer than ever, Because Marissa Whitmore wasn't just a mastermind. She was the eye of the storm. And Angela had just stepped into the hurricane. The hospital was quiet now, but the silence was heavy, loaded with the kind of tension that presses down on your chest and refuses to lift. Angela's mind raced. Every step Marissa had planned, every hesitation, every calculated move, it all led to this moment. If she failed, the consequences would be catastrophic. If she succeeded, she might finally unmask the full scope of betrayal. She moved swiftly, checking corners, glancing at cameras, calculating every risk. Marissa was brilliant, but she had underestimated Angela's resolve. She reached the ICU, her heart hammering. The daughter lay unconscious, hooked to monitors, fragile as glass. And in the shadows, Marissa appeared, her calm demeanor masking the danger she carried like a hidden weapon. "You shouldn't have come here," Marissa said softly, a hint of amusement in her voice. Angela squared her shoulders. "I'm not leaving, not until this ends." Marissa's eyes flicked toward the daughter, then back at Angela. "You think you can stop this? You don't even know the half of it." Angela swallowed, then took a careful step forward. "I know enough. Enough to save her. Enough to stop you." For a tense moment, neither moved. Time stretched. Then, a sound, a monitor beeping differently, drew Angela's attention. The daughter's vitals were spiking dangerously. Marissa's smile tightened. "See? You act, you panic. That's the weakness I've been waiting for." Angela's mind raced. She needed a distraction, a leverage point. And then she remembered the envelope, the instructions, the hidden clues. She had one advantage Marissa hadn't anticipated: knowledge. Swiftly, Angela reached for the medical console, overriding certain settings as Marissa lunged to stop her. Alarms blared, lights flashed, and in the chaos, the daughter's vitals stabilized. Marissa froze, momentarily thrown off. Angela pressed forward, confronting her directly. "It's over, Marissa. You miscalculated. You counted on fear and hesitation, but I acted." The mastermind's calm cracked, just slightly. You think this ends here?" Angela shook her head, resolute. "No, but it ends today, for now." Within moments, security, now alerted by the alarms, entered, surrounding Marissa. The tables had turned. The power that had seemed untouchable was broken by courage, quick thinking, and knowledge no one else had possessed. Angela exhaled slowly, finally allowing herself a brief moment of relief. The daughter was safe. Marissa was contained. The truth, partially revealed, hung in the air like a storm that had just passed. But the tension lingered, reminding Angela that power, deceit, and danger rarely disappeared completely. As she stood there, watching the aftermath, she realized something profound. Survival wasn't just about skill. It was about clarity, courage, and the willingness to step into the eye of the storm. And though this battle was over, the shadows of betrayal would follow her forever. The hospital was quiet again, but the quiet carried a weight far heavier than before. Angela sat in the small staff lounge, still shaking slightly, still processing the chaos she had survived. The daughter's monitors beeped steadily in the background, a fragile rhythm that was almost comforting. Marissa Whitmore had been taken into custody, but the truth of her motives, the depth of her planning, and the networks she had built remained partially hidden. Angela realized that sometimes, even victories came with shadows. She thought about the envelope, about the clues, and about every decision she had made. Every action had consequences. Every choice had risked not only her life, but the lives of others. The doctors whispered in the hallway, still cautious, still wary. The nurses moved with quiet reverence, having witnessed courage under pressure. And yet, Angela knew the story wasn't over. Not really. Somewhere out there, pieces of the puzzle remained. Allies, enemies, secrets waiting to resurface. She thought about Whitmore, about his composure, about the way he had tested everyone around him. Did he truly appreciate what had happened, or had he been playing everyone, including her, for his own purposes? Angela's phone buzzed again. Another message. No threats this time, only a single line. "You did well, but be ready. Power rarely forgives, and shadows linger." Her pulse quickened. A reminder, danger never fully disappears. Truth rarely sits still, and morality is never as simple as right or wrong. As she looked back at the daughter, breathing steadily now, Angela whispered to herself, "Some battles are won, but the war never ends." And with that, she stood, straightened her coat, and walked out of the lounge. The world outside was waiting, filled with uncertainty, hidden motives, and questions that demanded answers. If you were in Angela's shoes, with knowledge of the truth and danger pressing from every side, what would you do next? Angela returned to the hospital late that night, her mind still racing from the last confrontation with Marissa. Even though the immediate threat seemed contained, something told her the danger wasn't over. She slipped into the security office where cameras from the flight and hospital corridors were stored. The screens flickered, showing familiar faces, nurses, doctors, Whitmore's security, but also someone she hadn't noticed before. A man, dressed in plain clothes, moving deliberately through the plane aisle as the daughter collapsed. He wasn't a crew member, and he wasn't part of the Whitmore entourage. His hands lingered near the drink. His eyes scanned the cabin like a predator. Angela leaned closer, heart pounding. This was the person Marissa had relied on, the hidden hand behind the attempt on Whitmore's life. But why? What was his connection, and how deep did the conspiracy go? Her pulse quickened as she realized something chilling. The accomplice was still in play, somewhere nearby, waiting, watching. And as the footage looped again, Angela noticed something she hadn't seen before, a small logo on his jacket, barely visible. Recognition hit her like ice. This wasn't a random hitman. He was tied to a powerful network that Whitmore had battled in the past. Angela's mind raced. The game had just gotten bigger. The stakes had just doubled. She whispered to herself, voice trembling, "If he's still out there, then we're not safe. Not yet." The next morning, Whitmore summoned Angela to a private meeting. The tension in his office was suffocating, the city skyline gleaming through the windows like a silent witness. "You've seen enough to know this wasn't just a random attack," he said, his voice calm but commanding. "There are enemies I've made in business, in politics, in my own family. Someone wants me gone, and they've been planning for years." Angela's stomach tightened. "But Marissa, she's family." Whitmore leaned forward. "Family can be the most dangerous of all. She didn't act alone, and she didn't act out of revenge. She acted for power." Angela realized that the web of betrayal extended far beyond the flight or even the hospital. Every interaction, every hidden glance could be part of a plan she didn't yet understand. Should she trust Whitmore to lead her safely through this maze, or follow her instincts and act independently? And then the message from last night flashed again in her mind. Shadows linger. She understood. If she didn't act, innocent lives could be lost, and Whitmore's enemies might succeed. Angela's training and instincts kicked in. Every minute mattered. Somewhere the accomplice, or allies, were moving, plotting their next attempt. She moved through the hospital with calculated precision, checking monitors, questioning staff discreetly, and coordinating with Dr. Foster, the one ally she trusted completely. The daughter's condition was stable, but every second counted. Angela had a hunch. The next strike wouldn't be random. It would be calculated, aiming to exploit the chaos she had just navigated. The halls of the hospital, once familiar, now felt like a labyrinth. Each door, each corner, each shadow could hide danger. Angela's pulse thundered as alarms blared. False alerts, perhaps, or maybe signals of the real threat approaching. The audience feels her urgency. Every choice could mean life or death. Every moment is a mini cliffhanger. Angela whispered to herself, "Not this time. I won't let them win." The accomplice revealed himself at the most unexpected moment, a hospital technician Angela had trusted, someone whose calm demeanor had concealed deadly intent. Angela's quick thinking, knowledge of the envelope's clues, and Dr. Foster's timely intervention allowed her to intercept the strike. Monitors beeped frantically, alarms blared, and the daughter's vitals fluctuated, but Angela stayed focused, resolute. Marissa watched from the shadows, realizing her plan had been thwarted. Her calm facade cracked, revealing anger, disbelief, and desperation. Angela confronted Marissa directly, exposing her manipulation and the network of allies hidden in plain sight. Security moved in, finally containing the mastermind and her accomplice. The daughter was safe. Whitmore's enemies were neutralized, for now. But Angela knew the moral and emotional weight would stay with her forever. She had survived, but the story left lingering questions. How far would people go for power? How thin is the line between loyalty and betrayal? And as she walked away from the hospital, she whispered to herself and to the audience, "Some battles end, but the shadows always remain."